And they brought their guitars. And drums.
We just walk around with them all the time.
I noticed that about you guys.
Perhaps saw me wandering the streets of Calgary this week with my guitar in my hand.
You know, it's been actually kind of almost like that for you guys, just non-stop music making in one form or another for the last, 10 days? This is day 9 of 10?
We flew January 30th and got cracking on the 31st.
You sure did. Yeah. Okay, well, and I've run it. We work in the same building these last few days, and we've been bumping into each other in the lobby like at all crazy times of day and night. And you guys have been putting in like 10, 12-hour days, I think, if my math is right. Frequently isn't, but
we're working on our studio tans right now. Yes.
Well, just before we get any further, I think very likely a lot of people in this room are quite familiar with who the Northern Pikes are, but even for those that are extra familiar, at least 25% of the band could be a little bit new on them. So why don't we start with introductions? Brian, why don't we start with you?
My name is Brian.
Hello. Hello,
you.
Brian.
Yes, my last name is Potvin, and I am the guitarist, vocalist with the Northern Pikes.
Okay, and that gentleman to your left, the hirsute fellow over there?
Well, I'll let him tell you who he is. Yeah, he's got a mic.
My name is Jay Simcoe. I'm playing the guitar tonight, but I'm the bass player and singer in the Northern Pikes.
So is that a promotion or a demotion, do you think?
Well, the bass players are always they're always considered the backbone of the group.
They're often the, the quiet, soulful ones as well, I've noticed.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe back when I was still drinking.
Moving right along. Okay, there we go. Always with the rim shot. And over here we've got Donnie. Hey, Don.
Hello, everyone. My name is Don Schmidt, and I am the drummer for the Northern Pikes.
Okay, and over there on the end, this is the most junior member of the band.
The kid.
The kid.
Yeah, I'm Kevin Kane. And I'm playing a guitar tonight.
Good choice.
Yes.
Okay, well, guys, this is such an amazing thing. It's gone from being a legendary Canadian group to a legendary Canadian supergroup at this point, because, of course, you might know Kevin Kane from many other musical adventures, such as with the Grapes of Wrath, naturally. And I'm really curious about this. I'm sure a lot of other folks are as well. It's interesting to me because the two bands really sort of, in some ways, parallel tracks and similar histories, but you only really connected, a few years ago? Is that right?
You mean the Grapes and the Pikes?
Well, I just, having Kevin as part of the ensemble and connecting on a musical level.
There's a better chance that you're going to get some laughs out of this story than I am, so go ahead, yes.
Well, we'd never really played together or anything like that back in the day, but our careers did kind of run parallel, and I think both bands felt a certain Western Canadian small town affinity, or whatever connection. But we almost crossed paths right here in Calgary back in, 1985. We'd put out our first EP, and what's the radio station at the university? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
CJSW, the greatest campus station in the world.
Sure is. They are, because they, for whatever reason, they booked this young band from Vancouver, and so we took the train out here. We came on a 23-hour train trip, and because it was cheaper than the plane, and we didn't get berths because they were too expensive. We had the cheapest seats, so we couldn't sleep. We had to stay up to make sure that people didn't rob us. I was actually dozing off. Somebody tried to steal my sunglasses off my face, so I stayed awake. So by the time we arrived in Calgary, we were wiped out, and the fellow who had booked us to play the event took us to McEwen Hall. He goes, "Oh, there's this band playing. They're a great bunch of guys," and the Northern Pikes were up on stage, and they were playing "I Will Follow" by U2, and I think there were 4 people in the hall, and they had so much energy, and we were just kind of like, whoa, they're on a whole different plane than we are right now. So he said, "Hey, you want to hang out and meet them?" And we were like, "You promised us a floor to sleep on." So that's what we did instead. So we could have hung out then and become best buddies at that point.
We looked exhausting to hang around with that.
Exactly. Well, I was tired just looking at you guys. It was like, holy cow. Where did they get the energy? Obviously, they haven't been on a train for 23 hours.
So you fast forward, 3 decades or so?
Something like that, yeah.
And then all of a sudden you bump into one of these fellas, right?
Ran into Brian at a guitar store.
Yeah, so I went to a regular haunt that I go to all the time, Capsule Music, and there was there's that guy. I know that guy. I'm looking at the guy, and he looks like the guy from the Grapes of Wrath. Yeah, I think that's the guy from the Grapes of Wrath. I'm going to go talk to the guy from the Grapes. Hey, are you the guy from the Grapes of Wrath? And, yes, I am. And
I put down my broom and said, "What are you saying?"
love your sweet. Love the way you speak. Anyway, we found out that I lived in Toronto at the time. Found out that we lived very close to one another, and I don't know, just there was a lot to talk about and reminisce, and so we started chatting and hanging out and playing music. And in 2014, very close to our anniversary now, I guess, March, we played our first duo show together. Kevin and I just decided, let's just do a thing together. We'll, whatever, share the bill. And as sort of two independent solo artists on the same bill, but that lasted for exactly one gig. And then, because we just started wanting to play over each other's stuff all the time. And then we made a record, and we've been kind of doing this thing together for quite some time. And I think the Pikes, we were playing as a three-piece for a while, but there was always sort of this missing. We're a four-piece band.
Because Merle left a decade ago or so.
Almost, yeah. And
founding member.
I just feel like the music is heavily arranged for three voices and two guitars, and so I don't remember how exactly the conversation went down with the three of us, but I think Don. Well, I know Don and Jay came to me and said, "Do you think Kevin might want to play with us someday?"
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh yeah, of course. That makes total sense." And yeah,
That's exactly what it was. It just seems so natural. And I'm a huge Grapes of Wrath fan. I mentioned this before when we've been playing live that I bought. At the time, it was the only Grapes of Wrath record that I knew. It was September Bowl of Green. It was in 1986, 85. And I went to the local cool record store in Saskatoon, and they were playing it. And I actually heard it, and I really liked it. And I liked the haunting vocals and the chimey guitars. And I've been a huge fan ever since. And it's a total blast and an honor to be having Kevin Kane up on the stage with us every night
The honor
for
is
the last
mine.
number of months.
Thank you.
So it's pretty cool.
It's pretty amazing. It's the hand in gloveness of it all is unbelievable. And I also just want to highlight, it's so cool that you encountered that in an independent record store, a cool record store in Saskatoon. You guys bumped into each other at this really cool, legendary independent music store in Toronto. What a triumph that is for community and music being part of the community. It's you
don't
never know
bump
what's
into
going
each
to happen.
other online. You got to
I
actually
think-
go to a store.
I think music is like that dandelion growing out of concrete somewhere. Like it just springs up wherever, and you can't sort of. No one can force art away in any way at all. It's always going to find a way. So
Yeah, you try to uproot it, and it just keeps growing back. Damn
Exactly.
it. Well, fellas, I know that there's a lot to cover. I'd like to go all the way back to the beginning. But there's something exciting about seeing you holding your instruments. And why don't you get us started with our first? We're going to hear a handful of songs over the course of this experience. I'm really excited to hear an all-acoustic performance by the Northern Pikes, and I'm sure everybody else is here. Excited? Figured that. Yeah. So, what do you feel like playing first off?
Well, I think we'll play an acoustic version. What do they call that? Unplugged, if you will, with a plug, of the first single the Northern Pikes ever released on Virgin Records, and it happened in May of 1987, and there was a music video for it. Interestingly enough, though, the song was written about a year before the Pikes actually began, and I was in a band called 17 Envelope, and we sort of thrashed away on the song for a little while, and then we started doing it in the Northern Pikes, and became our first single. And it changed a lot of things for us, actually. Opened a lot of interesting doors, and it was pretty cool. I got to tell one story about the single, because I think this is kind of an interesting thing. It was released in May of 1987. We had recorded the record in January, February, and into March of 87. And there's always that lag time once you finish the recording of a few months before something happens and the record label starts promoting it and that kind of thing. And I was working outside at a golf course cutting grass, and we certainly were not, you had to do a lot of different things to keep making money anyway. So what happened was I was out on the golf course cutting grass, and then somebody drove up in a truck and said, there's somebody from Virgin Records that wants you to call. This is obviously long before cell phones and internet and those kind of things. So I thought, okay, they drove me into the truck, and I went into the phone there, and they said, well, we have a problem, because this was the day the single was being released, and the way that Virgin Records and every label, I guess, would release singles is they would do a mail out by courier, and they would all arrive at all the Canadian radio stations at exactly the same day, so everybody would get the single at the same time. The single was vinyl, a 45 vinyl, and so they said, well, we've had a problem that the radio station in Regina and Saskatoon, of all places, in Saskatchewan, did not get their single sent to them. So we know that we gave you a couple of promotional copies. Can you take these to the radio stations? And I'm in my green work pants and all greasy and stuff. And I said, okay. So they said, well, we've got an airplane ticket, and this is long before things changed with airlines. They said, you're on the plane in an hour to going to Regina. So, okay, I zipped home. I grabbed the 2 singles. I changed my pants, I think, and then ran to the airport, got on a prop plane, and flew about 20 feet off the ground, it seemed like, on the windiest day ever known to man. It was a horribly bumpy ride. Landed on the ground, got a cab, went to the Regina radio station, gave them the single, the 45, booted it back, got on the plane for another horrible ride back to Saskatoon, then got in the car, then took it to the radio station there, and then my mission was complete.
And you were back painting,
I had to go finish the fairways, so. So
That's how you got your nickname, FedEx.
Yeah, things are different now. It's a click of the mouse, apparently. Anyway, this is probably the most misunderstood of all the singles of the Northern Pikes. A lot of people, when they first heard this, thought it was kind of a celebrating the wonder of the teenage years. And it's
celebrating the horrors of the teenage.
This is more like the opposite of that, and it was written as a 19-year-old looking back, and this is called Teenland. 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me a kiss, give me a kiss. I wanna find out what I missed. Don't leave me now, don't leave me now, don't leave me at a time like this. Posters are blue, look just like you, a snapshot on a magazine. Now the rage, turn back the page. At one time you were just like me. Here in Teenland, oh, Teenland, oh, Teenland, oh, Teenland now. Drink up and drown, drink up and drown. This poison always brings me round. I need cigarettes, I need cigarettes, I need nicotine for the pack. Here. Teenland, oh, Teenland, oh, Teenland, oh, Teenland. Thank you.
Wow. The Northern Pikes, ladies and gentlemen. That was amazing.
It's kind of the high and lonesome version there.
Yeah, I'll say. It was really driving, though. It's so cool that there's just this galvanizing thing that happens when you guys make music together, whether there are amplifiers and kick drums and cymbals on stage or not. It's just like, you can just feel it. Why don't we go all the way back? Because you guys have this shared history together. That song, as you mentioned, that was the real breakthrough. And I'd like to get into a little bit about that as well in a moment. But first, I'm so intrigued by the fact that you guys, in a lot of ways, you just really did it old school. You paid your dues in a way that I don't know if bands anymore have an opportunity to do. And that is, you guys played a lot in different projects, and with this project. Long before the fame, there was a lot of hard work, a lot of small towns, a lot of touring. And as Kevin mentioned, you played covers, kind of like the Beatles did, you know? You just learned songs that you thought people would want to hear, and you went and played them for them, and maybe you slipped in some originals here and there. What kinds of bands were you covering back in the day?
Well, the term wasn't coined yet, but they were classic rock songs. Yes. Rolling Stones and Beatles and
Do you guys ever jam out on some of those these days?
These days?
These days, yeah.
Well, you know what? There are a couple tunes in our live show now that that there's a section in each of these songs that kind of opens up opportunities to mess around in familiar playgrounds for the listener. But no, we don't play Satisfaction in our set anymore. No.
You already got your Satisfaction.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of feel like there's a missing link there, because for me, I've always felt like one thing that makes the Northern Pikes amazing is that from the very beginning until this day, it's like every song is different from the last one. And, while a lot of great bands, particularly those that have been long-lived, they develop a sound and a formula, the Northern Pikes aren't like that. So how do you go from being like a group that plays covers of well-loved rock tunes to this band that has really nuanced sensibility and is always exploring? What happened to make you guys always reaching creatively like that?
Well, I would say, when the Northern Pikes started, this was I was in university. I'd had surgery on my wrist. I'm not looking at my watch. I'm looking at the scar on my wrist here. And we had all played in bands together and separately for many years. And it was really the fall of 1983, and I ran into Brian at the University of Saskatchewan. I'd gone back. I had dropped out of university before, but because my wrist was screwed up, I thought I would try and go back because I couldn't really work either, and I borrowed some money from my grandfather, and he was quite happy to send me back to university after a series of really pretty dead-end jobs. And being a musician, you just do what you got to do. So we went back, we met, and we decided to go to Louis' Pub for a couple of belts.
Because that's where all the good ideas
that
you'll ever have in your life.
I've had a couple good ideas at Louis' Pub.
It ends with a pub.
Well, by the end of that conversation, we went home that night, and it was like, you know what? Let's learn from our previous errors and our other bands that we had done, and let's get a new band going here. And we thought, let's try and make money, because the thing we were before, we were pretty fiercely independent. And Donnie and I had played together with actually Merle, original Merle from the band, in a band called the Idols. And we evolved into a band that did mainly original songs, and Brian had been in a band with Johnny Sinclair, who went on to play bass with The Pursuit of Happiness, as well as some other guys. And you had Doris Day, and they were
hold on.
Largely original group too.
Let's clarify this for a second. Doris Day wasn't in our band.
No.
The band was called Doris Day with an E after the Y at the end. Continue, Jay.
How great would it have been if she was in your band, though?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know she's from Saskatoon. Yeah. And she was just kind of hanging around in the early 80s there, didn't know what to do. And so tried to become...
Yeah, we went out, we did covers. We thought, let's make a living. And back then you could play 6 nights a week in clubs. And so we learned covers. And as Brian said, this was the era of kind of Brit Euro synth pop. A lot of it was popular on the radio. So we did songs like Major Tom by Peter Schilling. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. Or, I think we maybe did a Duran Duran song.
We sounded like Leonard Skinner doing Duran Duran songs.
Yeah.
That's what we
It
sound
was like Skinner plays Brit Europop, you know. We just never really pulled it off all that great, with the hidden motive of doing our own material, and we were always writing songs. And so we basically, the whole goal was save the money, put the money away. So we lived on nothing basically for a long time, and stashed enough to do an independent recording and to do some demos. So we did an EP in 1984. We were somewhat pioneers at that time in the prairies because we did an independent EP in 84 and another one in 85.
And it's important to note that was really hard to do then. You had to really work hard and have a bunch of money.
I went into a Toronto Dominion bank and sat down with a loans officer. I was like 21 years old at the time. And I looked across the desk at this person and said, I would like to borrow $2,000 to make a record with. And they went, okay. And I mean, just like an absurd situation would never happen today. What do you have for collateral? Well, we'll have these printed records when they're done. Sign right here, Mr. Podfan. Yeah.
It was so difficult in those days, though, to get your music out. And I think it's amazing that now, you know, with social media and everything and digital files, you can just ship things all around the world and get a notion back as to what the reaction is. But you guys were also trailblazers in that regard, too, because you were hard at work making the music, but also hard at work getting that music physically out into the world and asking them what they thought about it. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, basically, we bought padded envelopes. We put together a promotional sheet and put a picture in it, and we put the vinyl in there. And it was like
Comments card, too.
And a comment card. That was the most important thing, because that was a guy who was working with us, Robert Hodgins, who was a local booking agent, who was kind of acting as a manager, but he never really wanted to assume that role. He was just helping us out because he was a friend, really. And he saw potential in us and put in this comment card. So it was really difficult to find addresses. I wanted to send them out to college radio and independent radio and some commercial radio stations that I knew would have specialized shows that would feature independent music. So I wrote to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and somehow or other found a bunch of Canadian stations and sent them out. And then we sort of, what had happened with the band playing live was we got really kind of sick of playing other people's songs, wanted to play our own, and the gigs started drying up, essentially. And right at the point where we were thinking, well, maybe we won't play anymore or something, we started getting reaction back. And we were getting charts sent back, mailed back to us. And the first EP did great. We were getting charting at #1 on various college charts in the United States and in Canada. And it was like, this was crazy, you know. We were still really broke and, you know, trying to fumble our way along. And so we did the second one. We did it very quickly. One thing that was really good fortune for us was we had a very good friend named Mitch Barnett, who was a recording engineer at a recording studio, a real recording studio called Studio West, just outside of Saskatoon. And so he would sometimes sneak us in there to do recordings at night. And we kind of learned our chops from that a lot, you know, and got better at doing that. Anyway, what ended up happening was really about the middle of 1985, around the time we were getting ready to do the second one, record labels started becoming interested in us. And so we had people from Capitol Records and A&M Records and Attic Records and Duke Street Records and a bunch of other labels come out to see us playing our various gigs in Western Canada. And in September 85, Doug Chappelle from Virgin Records actually flew out to Saskatoon to see us play. And he loved the band, and by chance, we didn't really have a regular drummer. We always wanted Donnie to play with us, because I'd played with him in the Idols, and we knew he would be the perfect drummer for the band. But he was busy living life, being an adult as opposed to the rest of us. And things kind of changed for him. But anyway, he ended up filling in with us occasionally. And when Doug Chappelle saw us, he saw us with Donnie, and he fell in love with the four of us, with Merle and Brian and Don and myself. And he started following the band and was very interested in signing the band. And we had another drummer for a while, and then Donnie came back and joined us full-time in the summer of 1986, and the gigs started getting better, and we started becoming more of a band of note and getting press and getting airplay and actually some commercial airplay, and things just all kind of, the culmination of a lot of hard work and the stars lining up all kind of worked out for us. And then
does that answer your question?
Sort of. We ended up signing a record deal in December of 1986, and that's when things kind of changed. And I'm sorry, I'm rambling on and on.
No, I think people are taking note. Get a bank loan, go to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
give people self-addressed, stamped postcards.
We'll
to send
hand out
back
some.
to
We'll
you.
hand out some instructions later
Right.
for you guys.
This is how you make it in the music business, ladies and gentlemen. Oh,
You
yeah.
forgot the most important part. Go back in time.
Yeah, right. And also, you guys are so humble. I think you might also left out a really important part too. Donnie, you were telling me this story about how they fought to keep you because they believed in the chemistry that you guys had together. How did they bring you back into the fold?
Well, as I told you last night, Grant, as Jay mentioned, I played in the Idols since 1980 with Jay Merle and Neil Morgan, and the late Neil Morgan. And my daughter, Chrissy, was born in January of 83, so that is the main reason why I couldn't join the Pikes in 84, is I had responsibilities and I had a job, and I couldn't, as much as I wanted to, I thought every day about the band. You know, it was like, that's all I could think about was the music, and that's really what I wanted to do. So it was very frustrating for me to be in a situation where I felt like I couldn't join the band, although I wanted to. So I would fill in, like Jay said, a lot of times, because they went through drummers that were, in my opinion, very good drummers. But there's something about chemistry, like now with Kevin, it's so great. It's like he just fits. It's like it's something that you can't really pinpoint. It's like it either works or it doesn't. It's that simple. And so I would fill in with them. And when I filled in the time when Doug Chappelle from Virgin Records came to see the band, that was a real moment for me. It was like, okay, maybe this actually might work, you know? So it took a while. It took several months. Merle would call me and say, so, Donnie, what do you think? You know, do you want to join the band? I said, well, I can't yet. You know, and I actually quit my job once. I tried, and my boss convinced me to stay. Or he convinced me that it wasn't the right time. And I actually believe that. It wasn't necessarily the right time for me to just give it all up. But the second time, I said, I'm gone, I'm done. And what the band agreed to do was pay my child support for the first year and a half until I could afford to pay it myself. So that's amazing.
Nicely done, gentlemen. You're a class act.
We had faith in our dawn. Yes.
Okay, add that to the list of how to make it in the music business. So, and that brings us to the first record. You got back in the fold full time, and bang, first record, first full length record, and you know that was something of a success for you. And so, before we get any further along in the history, why don't we get back into the music, you guys? What do you think?
Sure.
What do you feel like playing?
We should play the title track from that record, I think.
Big Blue Sky.
Yeah.
The Northern Pikes, everybody.
1, 2, 3. There's a big blue sky smiling down upon me now. There's a big blue sky. It's got me flying on a cloud in the big blue sky. There's a reason for my life in the big blue sky. Can you remember when you were younger? There were so many things you wanted to conquer. Now your victories seem to go by you. They seem to run right by you. Never had a trophy, and I never wanted one. My brother has some money, never looks at them. Should recognition be your ignition? Shouldn't need ignition into the big blue sky. Smiling down upon you now. There's a big blue sky. It's got you flying on a cloud in the big blue sky. There's a reason for your lives in the big blue sky. There is someone I trust and tell my secrets to. I love her more than she can possibly imagine. And I have a strength inside, my conscience is my guide. I never have to hide from the big blue sky. You have to walk away sometimes, I know to say goodbye sometimes and break a heart. You have to make sure that you never lose the things you love. Never lose the things you love. And I keep my fences high, no one can look inside. The gate swings open only every now and then. And I have a question for all of your answers. And all of the dancers dance in the big blue sky, smiling down upon them now. There's a big blue sky. It's got them flying on a cloud in the big blue sky. There's a reason for their lives in the big blue sky.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly.
Wow. The Northern Pikes 2018. What a marvelous version of that song. That's always been like a sort of, for me, that's the real sleeper hit of that album in some ways. And I always thought it was kind of a measure of how cool you guys are that you made it the title track, you know? Why did you call the album Big Blue Sky exactly?
Gee, that's a good question. I think we wanted to identify ourselves with Western Canada and with the prairies. And we wanted to identify ourselves as Canadians in the first place. That's why we called ourselves the Northern Pikes. And yeah, there was just sort of a thing going on there. And you know, I can remember we were discussing a bunch of Canadian novels and Western Canadian ideas, and it just sort of seemed like one of those things where that song seemed like a natural title for the first record for a band from Western Canada.
You know, that also is remarkable because it wasn't that long ago, really, that Canadians were kind of ashamed to put Canada in their art. Like, if you were a novelist, your book would be set in Chicago instead of Montreal. You know, if you were a musician, you were trying to sound like you had an English accent, or you'd never sing about, you'd never sing about the Golden Boy in Winnipeg or being on Yonge Street in Toronto. You know, like, that's really changed a lot. And I think there was a period in time when Canadian bands, in particular in the rock and pop field, really kind of took ownership of that and said, no, we're not from England or the United States, we're from here, and that's what informs our music. And I know I was a youngster in teenage bands when you guys were breaking big, and it really did make an influence. You know, it played a role in our realizing, like, oh, well, just because, we have idolized, Jimi Hendrix and Cream as, 14-year-olds in the garage, it doesn't, we can actually like look to our own lives to inform our art. And I feel like the Northern Pikes had a lot to do with that movement. Did you get a sense like you were part of a vanguard of like that whole can rock scene of like the 80s and into the 90s with all those great bands?
I felt like I was aware that there was a change going on. I felt like as we were kind of coming up, Jay was referencing this time in 86 or 87 when we were starting to get courted, when CFNY, which was sort of this vanguard kind of maverick radio station that was playing a montage. I would imagine, I would describe as of music in Toronto, like a this really popular radio station in one of the biggest cities in North America, started playing our music right before we signed our deal with Virgin, and it was huge because it felt like we were sort of being accepted en masse. We were getting played in places that we could identify. It was wonderful getting those comment cards from a college radio station in West Virginia or something, but to be in Toronto, be at the corner of University Ave and Queen, and hearing Simple Minds on the radio, and then hearing Teenland from our independent record was like, holy fuck! I was like, it was visceral at that point. It was real. It wasn't just a letter we got back from somebody. It was we heard it, and that was a big deal. And what I felt was happening at the time, and the guys, I don't know, we've never really talked a lot about this, but I felt like can rock, Canadian content, as you described it, had this look, this feel, this complexion, this tone and sound, everything about it in the early, mid-'80s that kind of got shattered a little bit. And Katie Lang, Blue Rodeo, 5440, there was this sort of wave of music that came out in the mid-'80s that was like, no, we're not going to pretend we're from England or the United States. No, we're not going to dress in this kind of way. We're not going to play this kind of music, this sort of synthy, early 80s can rock, pop rock thing. We decided to do our own thing and just sort of rely on our own personalities, I guess. I think the Pikes never pretended to be anybody else other than who we were. And it's a big deal. In my life growing up, listening to rock music, there was sort of two paths. You either created a character, you were either in Kiss, or you created Ziggy Stardust, or you did this thing, or you laid your personality on the line and hoped that people liked you, And that's kind of what we did. And we're still getting played in doctors' offices and grocery stores now, so something worked, Anyway.
Well, it certainly was very gritty, real music, and yet at the same time, you guys sounded as pristine on on the radio. Those records popped. They still do, and that was, you guys paid your dues, and the music was amazing. But also, it sounded amazing, and I know some of the incredible super geniuses that work here at the National Music Center are pretty blown away that you guys, as youngsters, like right out of the gate, were working with some phenomenal recording engineers, mixing engineers. Was it just kind of lucky that you managed to get some of these people working with you? How did you end up getting some of the best production minds in the world making your music sound that incredibly sparkly and polished?
Well, to a certain extent, you make your own luck to a certain extent. I mean, I look at it, and we never, in the first place, we never thought we'd ever sign a record deal with a major record label. Our realistic goal, was to make good enough independent records that maybe we could get picked up and have them distributed. So we've surpassed that by actually signing directly to Virgin around the world, and we ended up, a lot of it's right place, right time, right people, right things, and I think you're probably referring to Bob Clearmountain and Hugh Padgham and Ed Stasium and some of these people.
And what I've heard from several of those folks is that, yeah, sure, they were, we were taking a flyer on them. These are really in-demand music business people. They said, but they were just such a great rock band, and I just wanted to get my hands on their music. Did you find very frequently that it was easy to collaborate with folks, like when you were still pretty green?
Well, our first three records were produced by Fraser Hill and Rick Hutt. And we learned a lot from him about studio production and bringing records one notch up. One thing I'm really happy about with those first two records on Virgin, Big Blue Sky and Secrets of the Alibi, especially, and the third, Snow in June. I mean, they didn't color their production a lot. The sounds were very honest and organic, and they weren't afraid to use acoustic guitar, and really they kept us true to our own sound. And I remember at the time I was thinking maybe this is a little plain, maybe we wanted to have a little more of that 80s Fine Young Cannibals snare going on and that kind of thing, but over time, I think it lasted longer because it was just really an organic sound. And like Bob Clearmountain, okay, Hugh Padgham, that was somebody that Doug Chappelle from Virgin knew from his days at A&M, and Hugh Padgham had worked with Sting and the Police and XTC and lots of great artists that we really liked. And basically, it was a phone call, said, would you like to try and mix some of the songs of the band? And they did. We finished in Bearsville, the first part of our recording, Bearsville Studios in Woodstock, New York, and then Hugh took 5 of the songs and mixed them, and Brian and I went out while he was mixing, and that was at A&M in Los Angeles. And at around the same time, Bob Clearmountain was living in New York City, and he would come up to Woodstock. He had kind of a second home up there, and he was in the mix studio. There were 2 studios in Bearsville Studios, and he was mixing other artists there. And I think Fraser, who was our manager as well as our producer at the time, ran into him at sort of the coffee area there and said, hey, work with this band, would you be interested in it? Not thinking really anything might happen from it. And then, and he heard some of our music and he liked it and said, sure, I'll do it right after New Year's. So
love that, running into people at coffee and just that's how it comes together. That's amazing. I always go for coffee, but maybe that's your next big break is waiting there. Well, okay, so it's amazing that all this confluence happens and you have this hit record. And this brings us, I think, to a really interesting, for me at least, it's fascinating that one of my favorite music videos of all time was shot right here in southern Alberta. Video was shot in East Cooley, Alberta. I've always thought, wow, that location is so beautiful. Where near Saskatoon is that? And then you guys just told me that when we were chatting the other day, no, that was right here in southern Alberta. Yeah. Don, what was that experience like when you were making the video for the Things I Do for Money?
Well, I remember it was very hot. It was in August of '87, and Ron Birdie directed about, I think, 11 of our videos, roughly, give or take. And they had scouted out the area, and they went to Rosebud, Alberta, where there's a theater there, and they saw a play. And there was an actor and an actress that they thought would be great for the video of Things I Do for Money, and they asked them if they'd like to be in it, and they said sure. So that's how it kind of started, was to come to East Cooley. And the thing I remember about East Cooley was the sign said, East Cooley, no exit. And I thought that was great, And so, it was, the one thing I remember about that couple of days we spent there was, this was in August of 1987, Teenland had been out, we were working on Things I Do for Money video, and our manager called, well, he was there with us doing the video, and he said, I've gotten a call, and I think you guys can open for David Bowie in Toronto in 2 weeks at the C&E. And we thought, I remember thinking, it's impossible. How is that possible?
You're sitting in this tiny town in the Badlands.
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, that's the power of having a record company like Virgin Records, I mean, if we hadn't have had that company behind us, I don't think we would have opened for David Bowie for sure. So, but I mean, that song, it was such a unique setting being there in East Cooley. It just seemed to make sense. It's like this almost abandoned looking town. Like there's really not many people there. And it just seemed desolate, and it seemed like the right mood for what we wanted to do with that song. And when I ever get asked what's my favorite Pikes song, I always say it's Things I Do for Money, because to me, it's always relevant. We all do things every day to make a living, and it's always relevant.
That's another thing that I find really amazing is you guys bring so much feeling to these songs. And of course, you've probably played them thousands of times already, and some of these songs were written by guys who were like 19, 20, 21 years old. What's it like now to sing these lyrics and to play these grooves? Do you look back and as you're performing them, do you have any perspective shifts, or does it take you right back to being 19? What's it like?
Kevin, you've been writing songs for decades. Why don't you answer this question? It doesn't have to be in a Pikes reference. You can.
I didn't really write about being a teenager, I don't think, so my songs are timeless. No, I don't know. I mean, when you obviously might think back on these things, but I mean, when I do an old song, I don't get this flood of memories of, oh my gosh, my life was this and that. I don't know. Maybe it's different for you guys, but they're just kind of songs.
For me, like trying to, playing a song that you wrote 30 years ago is either going to have some resonance with you now, all these years later, or it's not. You either got it right as far as longevity goes as a writer 30 years ago, or you didn't. I've written songs, and as everyone up here has, that when you listen to back at it 30 years later, you go, whew, it's just. And then there's others where you're like, wow, how insightful of me as a 20-something-year-old. So,
What a prodigy I was.
yeah, wow, I really am. Yeah,
What about tearing these songs apart? And, do you guys play in this format very often, where it's all acoustic? A lot of these songs have a pretty important, bass part. They have a really important electric guitar tone. What's it like to take them apart and scale it right down?
When the record company over the years tells you, you have to go to this radio station and you got to play a song, you figure it out. And so, yeah, we've gotten refined at this.
Yeah, and I've noticed also that you guys are pretty darn adaptable, because I got to kind of be a fly on the wall for your recording sessions here at the National Music Center. And let's not forget that you're making an album, basically as we speak, and you're doing it completely from scratch. You walked into the recording room not just with songs that you hadn't road tested yet, but the other guys in the band hadn't even heard them yet. You were just bringing song sketches and demos together.
Some hadn't even been demoed.
Really?
Some of the songs were just well, kind of goes like this, I guess, and then they're just hashed out.
And then by the end of the day, you got a finished song that's been mixed and mastered.
Yeah. Well, that's a great thing about bands is, there's a quality control level happening here. And also, the best editors are your bandmates and your best collaborators. And I brought a couple songs in for the sessions that were pretty brand spanking new. I was kind of finishing them at night in the hotel with Donnie and saying, you think this is okay? And he said, yeah, well, maybe that's a good one to work on. And so I'm just playing them, bare bones to the guys as everybody does. And putting faith in the fact that they're going to come up with cool ideas. And very interesting. Brian took he took a real twist. I had a song that I thought would be a very moody and atmospheric and cosmic vibe. And it became quite a heavy, semi-bluesy protest song. And I'm really happy with it. It's good. That's the great thing about a band, and that's the chemistry that kind of Donnie was talking about earlier on. You have faith in each other, and you kind of, and like he was talking about with Kevin, we played our first shows with Kevin as the Northern Pikes with him last summer, and we did two. We did one for Canada Day in Barrie, Ontario, which was really fun because there were lots of different Brampton, Ontario, pardon me. Bunch of different bands, so you get to kind of hang out with some of the other musician friends you haven't seen in a long time. And
it doesn't matter.
There's another town that begins with B.
It's another town, but it doesn't matter.
Oh. Maybe it wasn't Brantford. Brantford.
There you go, yes.
Home of the great Gretzky. Yeah.
There's so many towns in Ontario, you just can't remember them all.
And they all start with B for some reason.
We played at the Seneca Queen Theater in Niagara Falls. And both those shows were wow, this guy's just he's played with us for 35 years already. So it just kind of
no rehearsal.
No, it did. It's just sort of so it's really weird. It's like going on a date with a girl and you get married the next day. and it happened. The reality is...
Been there.
Yes, and...
Yeah, it's very impressive. I have to say, I spent 5 minutes in the room listening to you guys doing playbacks, listening to tracks and evaluating, and just the sense of mutual respect and support was amazing. And several times the word appropriate was used. What do you think about this thing that I did on the snare drum? I think it was appropriate for that part of the song. It felt appropriate. I think that's great. You guys are serving the music and each other, and that's why all of these people are here today, and that's part of what makes this record so exciting as well. And I got to tell you, the songs are amazing too. Wow, holy crow! I cannot wait for people to get their ears on it. So let's talk a little bit about the band, kind of in transition a little bit. You're a huge band. You go from being literally barely eating at all to a short period of time later, you're all over MTV and Much Music and radio. And all of a sudden you're at this level where you're getting a phone call asking you to open for David Bowie. How was it opening for David Bowie, by the way? Pretty good?
We played the Horseshoe Tavern the night before. I don't know how many of
Like
people in the audience are familiar with the Horseshoe Tavern? Yeah. Doesn't hold too many more people in this place. Whereas Exhibition Stadium in Toronto holds a lot more people in this room. So it was. I remember it was such a contrast. It was like playing the Horseshoe. We played it before. It was comfortable. And then the next night we're going into this very strange environment. We're escorted through these gates and we're sent to this trailer and stay here. Don't look Mr. Bowie in the eye. And whatever. Like all that protocol of being backstage at a big show that we were not used to. And the lasting memory I have from that experience was, I don't even remember sound check. I don't even know if we got a sound check. I don't remember a lot of these things. You guys would. I often go to Donnie like, did that happen? Because my memory's horrible at this stage. But I do remember walking out on the deck. It was light out still, and we started our set, and it was pretty full out there. It wasn't like people. I know people were still finding their seats, but it was still. There were enough people out there for you to kind of your heart go into your throat a little bit when you first walked out. But after about an hour, a song, I realized, wait a minute, it feels great. There's Jay, there's Don, there's Merle. It's like, let's just rock this thing. And yeah, no, it was exciting. It was a big deal for us at that stage.
It really feels like that's the story of the music business right there. You're playing a tiny, gritty club one night, then you're playing for like 50,000 people the next. Yeah. It's amazing. And then there was like a lot of transitioning going on with the songwriting and also the frontmanship. And Brian, there was a big shift that happened at a certain point. I was amazed. I didn't know this. Donnie was telling me that your first ever lead vocal performance was in the bridge on one of your hit singles.
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing. Why did you decide to start singing at that stage?
I think Jay decided that I would start singing at that stage.
I didn't want to sing your songs.
Yeah.
It was Hopes Go Astray, the song Hopes Go Astray. And Brian wrote this song, and he had started writing songs. And at the beginning of the Pikes, I was kind of like the primary songwriter, and Merle wrote a little bit. And obviously the songs wouldn't be what they would be without the contributions of everybody in the band. So ultimately they became Northern Pikes songs. But I sort of felt like, oh, come on, guys, write more songs. Let's, I love bands like the Beatles and where there's multiple songwriters, and I just always think that the band's always been song heavy. The whole thing is write good songs, the rest will follow. But if you don't have that, I figure you don't really have anything going on. You can look great and you can be the tightest band in the world, but if you don't have a good song, that's not happening. And our background was let's write really good songs. And so Brian started writing more, and when it came to do the second record on Virgin Secrets, he was Secrets of the Alibi. He came up with this song, and I ended up singing the song on the record, and I said, man, you got to sing something here. And he was very self-conscious. It's really tough if you're in a band, especially if a band has two other singers already, Merle and myself, to sort of step in there and become a singer. But I knew he could sing because I had heard him kind of singing away in the shower, and we spent a lot of time together in those days. A lot of time. Many stories I could tell you. But anyway, reality is he was singing a lot, and I could hear him humming away. And Rick, I credit Rick to a certain extent, Rick Hutt, because he just sort of said, no, Brian, you're going to sing this part. He sort of took the reins and I don't want to. Yeah. I don't want to. But he did. He went in there and he slugged it out and worked on it. And lo and behold, it sounded great. It's like, oh, so I believe it gave Brian some more confidence to sort of be more of a singer. And then by the time we came to do the third record, which was Snow in June, he was writing songs like crazy. And what we would do was we would exchange cassettes. We would each write some songs. And so he became part of this pattern. Instead of just Merle and I exchanging cassettes, Brian started putting his songs down. And I thought, man, this guy's writing some great songs. And it was like he came into his own and we ended up being a band with 3 lead singers by the time Snow in June came out. And I loved it. I thought it was great.
That is just so remarkable, a band that's already on top of the world, and that's when you decide to I just think that's amazing. So why don't we get into some more music? Where do you guys feel like taking us next?
Why don't we go to the Snow in June album?
Well, why don't we then?
Yeah,
What do you feel like?
We should do "Girl with a Problem," perhaps. Maybe we could talk about that. Yeah. All right.
This was yeah, you know what's funny? Songs, where they come from. Anyway, the video was one of my favorite videos, I think. Ron Birdie, who directed our, like Donnie said, I think 11 or 12 of our videos, did a great job with this one. It got to be #1 for a couple of weeks on Much Music, which was cool.
All right.
So we're gonna play you this sort of like it was written.
Works so hard, and at the end of the day, it's a little something extra to take it all the way. See, love can conquer all, and man, I wish it were true. She's a girl with a problem, there's nothing I can do, nothing I can do. You can bang your head against a brick wall, you can like her Humpty Dumpty, but you can't prevent a fall. Well, a bang, 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 and there's nobody home. She's a girl with a problem, and she wants to live alone. You can't lie to me. You can't lie to yourself for a while, till those lies turn into something else. I will talk to you. You will listen to me for a while, then you'll turn your back and away you go, away you go. And somebody please help me, it's driving me mad. Sometimes she's so good, but sometimes she's just so bad. Thinks I don't know, but I've been there before. More than once I've thought about just walking out that door, walking out that door. Take it away. I know nothing lasts forever. Take it away. Well, nobody wants a gallows, nobody needs a noose. So break those chains and let her run loose. I love that little girl, and I will love her till the end. She's got a little problem, she needs to have a good friend. Real good. You can't lie to me. You can't lie to yourself for a while, till those lies turn into something else. I will talk to you. You will listen to me for a while, then you'll turn your back and away you go. She's a girl with a problem, it's plain to see. I try to help her out, she won't listen to me. She's a girl with a problem. She's a girl with a problem. She's a girl with a problem. She's a girl with a problem, but there ain't no cure. No, no, no.
Thank you.
It was so good, Brian's guitar couldn't take it anymore.
I'm gonna Keith Richards this last tune.
Yeah, the old 5-string.
Yeah.
Well, we do have some Rolling Stones artifacts here in this building, so that makes sense.
Yeah, do you think there's a spare guitar string in this place anywhere?
Probably. So, I got one or two, I think. Well, listening to that, it just reminds me once again that these are such spirited songs with such great grooves, and they connected with so many. A lot of these songs were really, really big hits. And not one of these big hits has like facile lyrics about, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not like candy pop. These are really nuanced statements, and like that one, Girl with the Problem. That story that's such a complex story that you're telling there. Where did that one come out of, Jay?
Well, I think sometimes you end up writing songs kind of about yourself half the time. And then it's easy to project it onto somebody else. That's really what it is. I mean,
It's about you.
yeah, well, having been somebody who's been involved heavily in a lot of different things in terms of substance abuse and, and currently in recovery, it's pretty, it's kind of nice to look back at that. But at the time, I was kind of, it's really easy to get mad at people when you're really looking at yourself and you get frustrated with other people, and it's really you got to be frustrated with.
Well, I don't know if that has anything to do with what I'm about to ask, but it's also startling to me to consider that when the band broke up in 1993, was it? 93? I mean, we're really only talking like a half dozen years of being a band that is a high-profile act making hits. But what an impact you guys had, and what a great series of big-time successes that are lasting and obviously still resonating with people today. Why did you decide to hang it up at that point? You guys kind of seem to have the world by the throat.
That's a really, really complicated answer, and I don't know if, you could ask the four of us and maybe people who were around at that time the same question. You're going to get some different answers, but I was kidding around earlier about my, all my marriages not adding up to the sum of the years that I've spent with these guys, and it's true, and sort of subsequent. I'm trying to word this properly. In my life, I've noticed that the relationships that I make with people that I make music with are different than any other relationship. They just are. And my relationship with Don and Merle and Kevin, Don and Jay, sorry, and Kevin, new, but still it's heading down the same path, is that it's this very, very precious relationship. It's different than any other relationship I've had. And I think that we used the term at the time when we split up in '93 that we were going to break up for a while, perhaps forever, to save our friendships, because we kind of went into this as friends and trying to respect each other as much as possible. And it was less about, Jay talked about like, we want to have a band, we want to be successful, we want to make money, we want to make a living doing this, but it's so interpersonal, this stuff. Like, it's so deeply, deeply interpersonal. You sleep in the same room with these people night after night after night, and you're working so intimately. When you get into the creative process with another person or another group of people, it is akin to taking your clothes off in front of them. It's really, really a galvanizing kind of experience as far as relationships go that you have with somebody. So I felt like, retrospect, God, I mean, like all the marriages I had and all the relationships I've had, I've become a very, very strong proponent of therapy. Like, I think seriously, you find the right therapist, you find the right person who can just listen to you talk, it does wonders. And had I known this in 1993, I probably would have been advocating very hard within the group at that time. I was like, we have to find somebody. We've got to find a fifth person to come in and just talk. Let's just talk this out and figure it out. But no, we had to just get away from each other for a while. And, ultimately, pragmatically, what happened was Virgin called us in the early 2000s and said, we want to do a hits record with you guys, and would you be interested in participating in the liner notes and just being involved in this? And that started a conversation. Enough water had gone under the bridge by that point, and we didn't really maybe deal with some of the issues that made us split up at the time, but enough time had passed that we were able to start dialoguing again and talk about this, and that invigorated our interest in working together again. So anyway, I was kind of rambling here a little bit about relationships and music, but it's like I said, it's 34 years. It's a long time that we've been doing this together, and relationships zig and then they zag, right? Like it's very rarely is it just smooth sailing for 34 years straight. I wish I could say that. I wish I could say that it was lovely and wonderful. But no, we drove each other kind of crazy for a while, and I think that we were overworked. Frankly, I feel like we should have, in an organized way, said, look, let's just go away for a year. Let's not talk. Let's not do anything, and then we'll get back together. But it ended a little bit in some frustration and just, anyway. So I'm kind of, like I said, I'm not really answering the question, but I'm giving the Brian version of the answer.
I have a question for you,
can ask-
Brian.
Yeah. What's that?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any guitar strings in your guitar case?
I do, but I can fake it.
No. I know that if Doug asks another question, I've got a good 20 minutes to go change the string. I mean, if you want, I'll do it.
Oh, Lord.
Maybe you don't need a therapist. You just need somebody to be really snarky once in a while.
I didn't mean to listen.
You know I'm not going to say another word now, right? Like, but you have shut me up for the rest of the night.
That's not what I mean. We're all yakking away, but you...
Take it away, Kevin.
No comment.
It's implosion.
Are you good with 5 strings?
I'm going to keep it, like I said.
Okay.
I'm fine.
You're a professional.
I can play the riff. The riff.
The riff.
Yeah.
Oh, so we know what riff we're going to play then. Okay. Well, before we get there, let's just chat a little bit about this project right here, because a lot of these things that are amongst the...
It's under Doug's foot.
Okay.
What are you pointing at?
It's
Grant.
The pin from my string fell out. So. But I see it.
Okay.
It's okay.
Do you want me to get it for you?
No, it's okay.
No,
I see it.
I don't see it. Oh, there it is. I got it. Okay.
Thanks, Grant.
Pin.
With the pin. Not the
Magic
personal
pin.
identification number, but the actual pin.
No, the actual guitar pin, yes.
One of the things, we've been talking about a lot of the most exciting things in the history of the Pikes. But that includes, it's up to and including this moment right here that we are all experiencing, and that is that, I think we've all felt that there's just this joy when you guys play together, and there's a thing that happens. And it's been, you made some music in the early part of the 21st century, and some great music. But then when Merle left the band for good, it's been a long time. This is the first album you've made in this new iteration. No Merle. Not only that, the first album in like a decade and a half period. So to come in and assign yourself, paint yourselves into a corner where you say, okay, instead of playing it safe, we're going to start with nothing and expect to have finished work by the end of 10 days. Were you feeling nervous about that walking in? Donnie, were you nervous coming in? Were you like, I hope we get something?
I didn't know anything of what they were doing, period, zero. So as a drummer, it's kind of it's actually a good way to go about it, because sometimes when you hear demos, like quite often the guys would even do an acoustic and a vocal, it would be the demo. There wouldn't be a band track. And you can listen and listen and listen and get ideas, and then you go in the studio and they don't work. So there's something to be said about actually just first impressions, not really thinking too much. We spent, the Snow and June record was like an 8-month project, and we thought about songs and we worked on songs for days and days and weeks, and not that that's a bad way to do it, but it's a tiring way to do it, really. So this record, like I was going to mention before, Jay and I are rooming together, Brian and Kevin are rooming together, and we're right next door to each other, 503, 505. And so Jay's playing me his song, and I'm recording it and playing on my legs, and he's strumming away. And the next morning, Brian and Kevin said, yeah, we know it. We could hear it through the wall. So,
and then Don says, yeah, we heard you guys crying yourselves to sleep.
Yeah. So, there's something that I think we all four kind of said, let's just do this. Again, it's something about chemistry. There's something about 4 guys, in this case, working together on songs. And sometimes you can't plan it. It just has to come organically. And first impressions are good to go with. And that's what we're doing on this record.
Yeah, it's a funny thing with art. You can. I agree with Don. I think that first instincts are really important, but sometimes rappelling around the flagpole over and over again, helps you see things that you maybe didn't see at first blush.
You just have to work it out, It's just like, it's the same old thing. That's what's so fun about being in a band, is the fact that you can bounce ideas off people and they'll come up with some interesting thoughts and some interesting parts and sometimes throw the song in a different direction than you originally planned. Or sometimes you just go with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You just go with it, you know?
Jay and I have had a pattern over the years with each other's songs where he's come in and said, look, I know that this melody is good. I know these words are good. The chord structure is fine. Like, I know it's all good. I don't know what to do with it. And me being removed to a certain degree has helped us create really solid arrangements for for those songs, and reciprocally, it's worked the same way. It's happened a couple times over the last 10 days where we've walked in. It's like, I don't know, I got this thing. I know it's solid in its architecture, and on the blueprints of the music is like, this is a solid song, but how to unfold it, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't, yeah, sort of.
Yeah, well, I guess there were a couple of songs that I brought in, and one was, you know, like I say, it was a moody, atmospheric song, I thought, and it became a sort of a heavy rock song that was actually inspired by a painting of a naked Donald Trump looking out a window. So I'll just leave it at that. And then the other song was, I knew it was a solid song. I played it for the guys, and they said, "Oh yeah, it works great. It'll be a good song to do." And then we started trying to work it out and do it in a more traditional band form, and it didn't seem to be working. And then finally, Brian said, "You know what? Let's go back to the basics on this and just do an acoustic and a voice." And then so Kevin ended up doing basically a finger-picking kind of folk style on it. I did a vocal on it. We kind of built it from there, and it became something completely different. So, you know, that's the adventure of creating art and being part of that. I mean, it's just, you can't describe it to anybody if they're not there. You're there. You're cerebrally and emotionally connecting, and it's just one of those things where, I don't know. At the end of the day, man, I'm drained, but I feel like, you know, it's just one of those things where it's just like your brain is blank. You're sort of like, you've been through this series of things, and you're still, corners of your mind are still thinking about the song and the songs and the future songs you're working on. It's totally absorbing and totally addictive and just wonderful. It's a great thing to do. It really is.
Well, what an intensive experience, and this is a facility that can handle like pretty much any, like if you have a whim, bang, we have, because I mean, I can't walk 2 feet in Studio Bell, the home of the National Music Center, without being dazzled and getting goosebumps by seeing some item of, whether it's a piece of gear that somebody played or a fabled instrument that creates a certain sound you can only get from that instrument, and it's here. And in some cases, you know, like Stevie Wonder's synthesizer, like that's the actual one, you know? So I got to ask you, like, I know it's been 15 years since the last record. How and when did you decide to make the record here and now and in 10 days?
Well, the Northern Pikes did a celebration of our 30th anniversary of our debut record last fall, Big Blue Sky, and we played here. We played at the Eddy on the tour. Did a couple dates in Calgary on that tour, actually. And after the show, Andrew, our lovely Andrew
Mosker, the guy that he's the Willy Wonka of this place.
Exactly. He introduced himself. Don and I chatted with him, and he just said, "We'd love for you to record here." And I listened very carefully to what
We
he
said
had
yes.
to say, and we said yes, and we just worked it out. It was a no-brainer. I mean, really, you know, it was time for us to go and make some new music. And Andrew kind of walked into the conversation at the right time, and it was like, okay, yes, this makes perfect sense. So,
just another one of those felicitous moments.
Exactly.
We've heard tell of a few of them tonight. What do you guys, I mean, you've had the opportunity to, and that's one of the things I must say that makes this place so special. It's not just a treasure trove with these amazing, magnificent instruments and sonic tools, in many cases, celebrated themselves as much as some musicians are, but they're not behind glass. They're here to be used, to be, you know, to be seen by school children on tours, you know, and to be recorded with, such as you guys are doing on this particular jaunt. What are some of the things that you're most jazzed to be interfacing with here at the National Music Center in this recording project?
I played Mellotron. That was fun. I love Mellotrons. And what else did I get to play? I'm probably the worst pianist to ever touch David Foster's piano. And there was also a really old Wurlitzer that you turn it on, do a track, and then it would stop working, so you turn it off and then turn it on. So basically, you're constantly turning it on and off to get it to work. But it sounded really cool.
Of all the studios actually that we've worked in, this one has far and away the most astonishingly magnificent mic cabinet. Like, it's just the microphones here are just like, you know.
They're weird mics too. They're not your usual,
exactly.
stuff you see everywhere else.
Yeah.
We've recorded in a lot of great studios. I mean, I can think of A&M in Los Angeles and Bearsville Studios in Woodstock, New York, and many others. And
Recently deceased List Studio.
yeah, the studio in Warren Heights. And I mean, this studio we're working in is as good as, if not better, I would say. This is world-class studio. There's a number of studios in there. And Brian was talking about when we first were inspired by this, when we were setting up for the King Eddie, they said, well, do you want to see the Rolling Stones mobile truck? And I'm a huge Rolling Stones fan, and a huge music fan, as we all are. And we went in there, and then they were showing us inside the mobile recording studio, and they put on some vinyl of a Led Zeppelin record. Well, not a Led Zeppelin record, it was Led Zepp 4. And we're listening to this, I'm going, okay, and that happened here. So, wow, that's cool. And then I think it was Kim that took us for a walk around the building and a tour, and we saw all the studios and saw the various things, and we were like, this is fantastic. This is like, and the live room really caught us because it was big, it had booths that fold in, and that's what we like to do. We like to cut the songs live off the floor. All four of us are in the room together, and there's 2 booths, and you're doing it live. There's separate headphone feeds. There's so many things technically that are great. And we're recording in these vintage microphones, and I mean, between, Graham Lessard and Jason and Eric, the people that we're working with here, it's just fantastically talented people. I mean, it's just like, so what that does, it makes it easier for you to create the music you want to create. And you have options available with everything you're doing, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just all working really, really well. We've recorded so far, we've completed 6 songs, and we're on a 7th, and we're loving what's going on here.
When are we going to hear that music, Jay?
Early 19.
Early 2019. Yeah,
We'll
that's
hold you
our
to it.
plan to release it. Yeah.
Being that there are still, 17 strings on stage, before we lose any more, I think maybe it's time. Is it time to play the riff?
Sure.
Okay, so this is going to be the final musical offering for this evening, and this will conclude our what has been an amazing and really magical for me evening. And I know that this is something that's been a long time in coming, but at the same time, this feels like just the right time to be doing this. So why don't I let you introduce this last one? How about the Northern Pikes, everybody?
Thanks, Grant. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for all of you to spend your Friday night with us tonight. I appreciate it. So in 1987, we were working on this first record, Big Blue Sky, and I met a woman in Toronto, and her parents graciously allowed me to stay at their house when we had time off. Well, I was very young, so was she. Guys would go back to Saskatoon, and I'd go to Toronto and spend time with them. And they had a little guest room set up in their house for me. That's where I started the night anyway. Anyway, and so there's a hide-a-bed in there and a little color TV in the corner, and I'm young, right? I'm like 22, 23 years old, so I'm loving this. Like, oh, my own room, I got a TV. Ooh. So I'm laying in the hide-a-bed watching TV, and remember Rhoda? Rhoda came on. I'm watching Rhoda, and there's a conversation between a prototypical-looking, good-looking woman and a whatever prototypically unattractive woman. And so the unattractive woman says to the attractive woman, "Look at you. What could possibly be wrong with your life? You're beautiful." And she turned to her and said, "I'm not really beautiful. I just look that way." And I thought that was hilarious. So I wrote that down in my little notebook, and we came up with this song not too long after that.
in a Calgary bar. In walked a girl who looked like a movie star. Yeah, she stared at me and it was turning me on. She said she worked in a beauty salon. I heard her voice inside to say, she ain't pretty, she just looks that way. We made a date to go for a drink. I wore my jeans and she wore a mink. There was this misconception all over town that she ain't lonely, got hot by the pound. She said, take me home, there won't be no bossa. I said, she ain't got some change for the bossa. Watching her leave, I heard the bartender say, she ain't pretty, she just looks that way, Kevin. I called her up, and her father was home. She said she's busy, boy, she can't come to the phone. I held my breath and decided to wait. 'Cause guys like us, we don't get many dates. I fell in love with a model from hell. It took some time for my hormones to tell, yeah, that chasing her has been the greatest thing. She ain't pretty, she just looks that way, no. Her ego out checks incredibly fast, but her personality didn't have the cash. I laughed it loud to my total dismay. Oh, she ain't pretty, she just looks that way. She ain't pretty, she just looks that way. No, she ain't pretty. She ain't pretty. No, no, she ain't pretty. Oh, she ain't pretty, she just looks that way. Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.